The officer's hand closed around my wrist before I even saw him coming. One moment I was standing at the corner of 5th and Madison, backpack slung over one shoulder, AirPods half in, watching for the bus as it rounded the block. The next, thick fingers dug into my skin and a voice spoke low in my ear. "Don't move." I froze. My first thought was that I must have dropped something. My second was confusion. The third arrived the instant I turned and saw his face the way he looked at me, not like a person, but like a problem that needed solving. And that third thought was quiet, clear, and sharp. Asterisk, he has no idea whose daughter he just put his hands on. Asterisk, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the morning it all began, because what happened at that bus stop didn't come out of nowhere. My name is Nia Lane Hayes. I was a senior at Georgetown, home for break, sleeping in my childhood bedroom with the glow-in-the-dark stars still clinging to the ceiling from when I was little. The house smelled the way it always did. Cedar would end whatever my mother had left, slow cooking in the crock-pot since early that morning because my mother was always awake before dawn. She had been up in those quiet hours every single day of my life. For most of my childhood I thought that was simply what mothers did. It was only much later that I understood why. My mother's name is Vanessa Hayes. To me, she was simply Mom, the woman who drove me to swim practice in the dark and never missed a single recital, who made the best jerk chicken in the neighborhood, and who possessed a voice, low and steady, carrying an uncheckable finality that could silence a room without ever raising its volume. She was careful with her words in a way that used to frustrate me as a teenager. I wanted her to yell back sometimes. She never did. She would simply look at you with those dark, steady eyes and say exactly what needed to be said, nothing more. And somehow that was always more powerful than shouting. That morning she was standing at the kitchen island when I came downstairs, already dressed in crisp black slacks and a white Oxford, her hair pulled back neatly, silver stud earrings in place, the ones she wore for important meetings. A travel mug of coffee steamed beside her right hand. She was reading something on her phone, glasses low on her nose, and when she heard me on the stairs she looked up. Her whole face softened into warmth the way it always did. No matter what she was carrying, she could switch it off and be completely present for me in an instant. "Morning, baby," she said. "Morning." I went straight for the coffee. The kitchen was warm and smelled of cinnamon from the oatmeal she'd left covered on the stove. Outside the window, the maple in the backyard was turning brilliant shades of orange and red. "You're up early." "I'm always up early," she replied, which was true. "You have something important today?" I asked, choosing my words carefully around the subject of her work the way you might feel your way through a dark room, sensing the shapes but unsure of the exact edges. "I have a meeting," she said, which meant yes. She slid her phone face down on the counter, not rudely, just making space. "What are you up to?" "Going to Leela's. Taking the bus." She looked at me over her glasses. "The bus?" "I'm grown." "Mom, I know exactly how grown you are," she said, and there was a minor chord in her voice that I registered but didn't stop to examine. "Which route?" "The one to DuPont Circle." I poured my coffee. "I'll be home for dinner." She held my gaze one extra second, not long, but just past comfortable, then nodded. "Text me when you get there." And that was that. The walk to the bus stop was familiar. The kind you could do with your eyes closed 3 blocks down Chestnut, left on Ardmore, right on 5th, then half a block to the bench at Madison. I'd done this walk countless times, in every season, with school books on my knees and music in my ears. The neighborhood was quiet that morning, the light soft and golden through the trees, the smell of chimney smoke mixing with damp pavement from the night before. A dog crossed ahead of me and gave that neighborly nod, the one that says, Asterisk, I see you. We're both just fine. Carry on. Asterisk, I nodded back and kept walking. I reached the stop and sat on the far end of the bench. A woman was already there, maybe in her 50s, headphones around her neck, scrolling on her phone. I pulled out my own phone and put one AirPod in. The sky was a muted gray, the sun trying its best to break through. Dryly scraped across the pavement, I was looking at a text from Leela when I heard boots on the pavement, not jogging, but walking with purpose, the rhythm of someone approaching with intent. I looked up. He was already close, white, heavy-set, the kind of bulk that had once been muscle but had softened over time. He wore a Metropolitan Police uniform, his badge catching the dull morning light. He was looking straight at me, not at the woman with the headphones, but at me. A cold feeling moved through my chest. I recognized it instantly, that particular chill, the way you recognize a scent from childhood without needing to think. I had grown up in this city. I was a black girl who had grown up in this city. I knew what that look meant. I had hoped that by now, in this neighborhood, I might not have to feel it so plainly anymore. I had been wrong before. I took one AirPod out, sat up a little straighter, and kept my hands visible on my lap, the way you learn to do, the way it's passed down in some families like recipes or holiday traditions. He stopped a couple of feet in front of me. You waiting for something? His voice was flat, the tone of someone who already knows the answer and is only asking for form. The bus, I said, keeping my voice steady. The one to DuPont Circle. He looked at me for a long moment, then at my backpack, then back at my face. This is private property. I blinked. It's a bus stop. There've been complaints, he said. Loitering. The woman with the headphones had glanced up. I could see her in my peripheral vision, watching now, her phone lowered, her expression uncertain, like she was deciding whether this was her business. I'm waiting for the bus, I said again, slower this time. It should be here soon. Can I see some ID? The cold in my chest hardened. You're asking me for ID. I'm asking everyone. He still hadn't looked at the woman with the headphones. Not once. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my student ID, held it out. He gave it a cursory glance, the kind that confirms what he already believed. This isn't government issued. I have my driver's license, I said. In my bag. I didn't reach for it without warning. Can I reach into my bag? Something flickered across his face, irritation. Perhaps, at being forced to acknowledge what was happening. Go ahead. I unzipped the front pocket, pulled out my wallet, found my license, and held it out. He took it and stood there studying it for far longer than necessary. I could feel the woman on the bench watching, and the neighbor from down the street who had stepped onto her porch and paused to watch too. I felt the weight of being observed, assessed, held in place like that. Underneath the cold steadiness I was fighting to keep, something hot and angry began to rise. He handed the license back. You live around here? Yes, where? A few blocks that way. He looked at my bag again. What's in the bag? Books, I said. A laptop. Charger. Headphones. Mind if I take a look? That was when I stood up. I hadn't planned it. My body decided before my mind caught up. I held the backpack at my side and said, very quietly, yes. I mind. His face changed. The casual authority slipped, and something uglier showed underneath. He took one step closer. "Miss, I'm going to ask you to. I know my rights," I said. "And I know yours. You have my ID. I'm waiting for a public bus at a public stop. I haven't consented to a search, and I'm not required to. If you're detaining me, tell me why. If you're not, I need you to step back." I had practiced this not out loud, not in front of a mirror, but in the quiet way you prepare for something you hope you'll never need. My mother had a phrase for it: quiet armor. You put it on before you leave the house and hope it stays invisible. Sometimes it doesn't matter anyway. He stared at me. "You got some mouth on you." Something bitter and furious rose in my throat. I swallowed it down. "Sir," he moved then, not toward my bag. His hand shot out and closed around my left wrist, above the jacket cuff, fingers digging in with a casual brutality, the grip of someone used to using it and expecting no consequences. "You need to calm down," he said. The pain was sharp and immediate. My phone clattered to the pavement. The woman on the bench gasped. My vision narrowed, bright at the edges, the way it does when adrenaline takes over. I looked at his hand on my wrist. I looked at his face. I didn't scream. I didn't pull away. My heart was pounding high in my throat. My free hand shook. All I could think, with startling clarity, was, asterisk, Mom is going to see this man's badge number. Asterisk, what I didn't know, what I couldn't have known in that moment, was that my mother was already hearing about it. I didn't understand until later, after the bus came and went without me, after the woman with the headphones had filmed several minutes of video on her phone, after the neighbor on the porch had stood with her arms crossed and memorized the patrol car's number, after the officer finally let go of my wrist and told me I was free to go. With a sneer that didn't feel like kindness at all. All I knew was the bruise forming under my sleeve, the cold air, and the pavement under my feet as I walked measured, not running, not yet, and the thought pulsing through me, asterisk, call Mom, call her now, asterisk. She answered on the first ring. Nia. Her voice was not the mom voice. It was the other one, the flat, even, room-silencing voice, and she used my name the way she did when she already knew. "Where are you?" It wasn't really a question. "Fifth and Madison," I said, my voice cracking just a little. "Mom, a cop just I know," she said. "Are you hurt?" I looked at my wrist. He grabbed me. "My wrist. I don't think it's broken. Are you standing up?" "Yes, good," she said. "Keep walking. Don't stop. Don't run. Go to the coffee shop on Wisconsin and sit down inside. Wait for me." There was a pause, the kind that comes when someone shifts into a different mode. "And Nia, do not post anything." "Not yet, Mom." I heard you," she said. "I know what he did. I need you to trust me right now. Can you do that?" I walked. The maple trees swayed overhead in a gust of cold air, orange leaves skimming the sidewalk. My wrist throbbed. My phone screen had a new crack from the fall. "Yeah," I said. "I trust you." The line was quiet for a moment. Then my mother spoke in that low, precise, dangerous voice I'd heard my whole life but never fully understood until now. "Good. Don't worry about the officer. Sweetheart, I'll handle the officer." I found out later what she did in those minutes that followed. I found out later, and I'll tell you, because this isn't a story that ends at a coffee shop. This is a story about what happens when someone with real, legitimate power, the kind that doesn't need to shout or wave its arms, decides that enough is enough. But that part of the story starts with what I didn't know about my mother, what I had chosen, in the comfortable corners of my mind, not to fully examine, about where she went every morning before dawn, about why she was so careful with her words, about what her voice had truly been trained for, because Vanessa Hayes was not just my mother. She was the deputy director of the United States Secret Service, and she had already made calls before I even sat down with my coffee. The coffee shop on Wisconsin was called Ember. It had exposed brick walls, a chalkboard menu, and tables that were a little too small for anything but sitting still and thinking hard about your life. I sat in the back corner with a pistachio latte. I hadn't ordered. The barista had made it and slid it across with a look that said she'd seen my face and made a decision. I stared at the crack in my phone screen and tried to find my breath. My wrist hurt not badly, but with a steady insistence that kept pulling my attention back to it. I pushed up my jacket sleeve and looked. The skin was reddened, the kind of red that would turn purple by evening, for distinct marks where his fingers had pressed. I pulled the sleeve back down, wrapped both hands around the warm cup, and focused on the heat. The woman with the headphones had filmed it. I'd seen her phone out. I didn't know if she would post it or let it disappear into the private archive of things witnessed and filed away. The neighbor had seen it too. The whole interaction had lasted only minutes, but it felt like an hour. It cost me a cracked phone screen, a bruise, and something harder to name, a residue, a film, the particular exhaustion of having to stay controlled in a moment that didn't deserve it, of keeping your voice even and your hands visible while something ugly happens to you, and you're calculating the cost of reacting differently. I thought about calling Leela. I thought about calling my dad in Atlanta, who would have wanted to drive up immediately. I thought about a lot of things and did none of them. I sat with my coffee and waited for my mother, and while I waited, I had no idea that in those minutes since we'd spoken, my mother had already done several things that were going to change Officer Derek Harlan's life permanently. She had called her deputy, Trevor Lang, a methodical man who had been with the service for many years and who answered on the first ring. As he always did, she had given him the location, the time, the description. The badge number came from a quick call to a contact at Metropolitan Police, a contact who owed her a favor and paid it immediately. She had confirmed the incident had been documented. The woman with the headphones, whose name was Tasha Wilkins, had already sent the video to a few people and posted it online with a caption describing what had happened, including the badge number. And then my mother had done the most important thing. She called the chief of Metropolitan Police directly, not through channels or aides, but on a private number. She spoke to him in that flat, even, final voice for several minutes. Trevor didn't know exactly what was said, but when the chief hung up, he immediately called his deputy chief, who called the commander of the district, who called the precinct captain, who called Derek Harlan himself. All of it happened in a chain, like dominoes falling, where no one was watching. In the time it took me to unwrap a sugar packet I wasn't going to use. She came through the door of Ember not long after. She was still in her work clothes, walking the way she always did in public, economically, without wasted movement. A woman trained to enter rooms like water filling a vessel, fitting its shape without announcing itself to people, came in just behind her. A man and a woman in plain clothes, who I recognized as the kind you don't notice unless you're looking. They sat near the door and pulled out phones with the casual choreography of people very deliberately not looking at you. My mother sat across from me. She looked at my face first, the way she always did, reading something there I couldn't fully read in myself. Then she looked at my wrist. I didn't say anything. I just pushed up my sleeve. Her jaw tightened with a precision like watching a mechanism lock into place. Brief. Controlled. Final. She reached across and very gently held my wrist in both hands, turning it slightly, examining the bruising without touching the marks directly. Then she set my arm down, folded her hands on the table, and looked at me. How are you doing? She asked. I'm okay, I said. Mom, I know what he did. She paused. Tasha Wilkins's video is already spreading. It will be everywhere by tonight. She said it without inflection, like stating a fact. Derek Harlan, badge number 3128, with several prior complaints and use of force incidents, one of which was reviewed and deemed within policy. The last words landed like something heavy set down hard. He's been a patrol officer for years. He will not be one for much longer. I stared at her. Mom, Nia, she met my eyes. You have nothing to do with what happens next. You went to a bus stop. He put his hands on you. You kept your head. You did everything right. A brief, careful pause. The rest is my job. I had heard her say those words before. The rest is my job. And they had always carried a weight I didn't fully understand. I understood it better now. Something loosened in my chest. Not all the way, but enough. I should have known something was wrong, I said. In the neighborhood, the way he walked up I knew before he even opened his mouth. I just sat there and, you had every right to sit there, she said, with a sharpness that was also care. Waiting for a bus is not a crime. I need you to keep that clear. You did nothing wrong, he did. Full stop. She pushed the latte a little closer. Drink your coffee. I almost laughed, but it came out as something between a laugh and a sob. She watched without moving, steady as a wall you can lean against. Tell me what he said, she said. All of it. I told her everything: the private property claim, the ID request, the search, the comment about my mouth. She listened without interrupting, the way she always did, completely present. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. He said you had some mouth on you? Yes. She nodded slowly. Good, she said quietly, almost to herself. I didn't ask what she meant. I was beginning to understand. What happened over the next days I know partly from what I saw, partly from what Trevor Lang told me later, and partly from the news coverage, which was significant. Tasha Wilkins's video spread rapidly. It was picked up by local news and then national outlets. Within a short time, Derek Harlan's name was in headlines, and the comments under the original post were filled with a collective fury that was hard to read but impossible to ignore. The Metropolitan Police issued a statement that afternoon, careful, institutional, saying the matter was under review. It satisfied no one. Soon after, the ACLU filed a formal complaint on my behalf. They had reached out through my mother's office, which I was still processing. My father called from Atlanta, and I talked him out of driving up, which took patience. A few days later, I met with a lawyer named Camille Rivera, recommended by Trevor. Her office was on K Street, smelling of carpet and old coffee and the seriousness of people who deal in real stakes every day. She had a sharp face and reading glasses on a chain, and a legal pad already filled with notes. Before I sat down, she looked at the photos of my wrist, which had turned the exact shade of purple I'd expected. Then she looked at me. Do you want to pursue civil action? She asked. I want him to not be able to do this to anyone else, I said. She clicked her pen. Those things aren't mutually exclusive. In fact, they often go together. The Internal Affairs Bureau opened a formal investigation. Tasha Wilkins was interviewed for local news segments. The neighbor, Mrs. Evelyn Thompson, a retired teacher who had lived on that block for decades, gave a precise and devastating statement, the kind that comes from someone who has watched their neighborhood and waited for the right moment to speak. I didn't know about the second video until a couple of days later. Leela called me early in the morning, which told me before she spoke that it was important. "Nia," she said, "have you seen what someone posted?" I hadn't. I found it seconds later. It was from a doorbell camera a couple of buildings down from the bus stop, angled to catch the sidewalk. It had captured the full interaction from a different angle. What it showed, beyond what Tasha's video had, was the exact moment Harlan looked at the woman with the headphones, then back at me, and made his choice. The deliberateness, the selection. It was one thing to describe it, another to see it in slow motion in a thread that had been shared tens of thousands of times. I sat on the edge of my childhood bed, under the glow-in-the-dark stars, and watched it twice. Then I put the phone face down and sat with my hands in my lap. The room was quiet. A car alarm went off somewhere and faded. I thought about the version of that morning where I had caught the bus, gone to Leelau's, had coffee there, come home for dinner, and none of this had happened. I thought about all the versions of that morning. I couldn't see the other bus stops, the other benches, the other women who had looked up and seen that expression on that face and hadn't had a camera nearby or a mother with a direct line to power. I thought about that for a long time. My mother knocked and opened the door. She was in her work clothes again. She was always in her work clothes. She had 2 cups of coffee and set one on my nightstand without asking, then sat in the chair by the window. "You've seen it," she said. Double quotes, "Yes. How are you?" "I keep thinking about other people," I said. "Other mornings, other bus stops." She looked at me, and in her face I saw something I didn't often see, not the deputy director, not the professional, but the weariness of a woman who had been thinking about other bus stops her entire life, who had put on quiet armor every morning for years and had taught her daughter to do the same, understanding in some deep, tired place that the armor shouldn't have to exist. "Yes," she said simply. "That's the right thing to think about." We sat together in the morning light for a while, drinking coffee, not filling the silence. The formal hearing was held weeks later. I sat in a conference room at the Office of Police Complaints with Camille Rivera on my left and Trevor Lang, who was there not in any official capacity, but as someone who had known me since I was little. On my right, Harlan was there across the table with his union representative, a thick-necked man who looked like he'd handled many of these and was already calculating the angles. Harlan himself looked smaller than he had at the bus stop. He looked like what he was, a man who had made a bet based on what he thought he knew about the world and had miscalculated badly, in ways he was still realizing. He didn't look at me when he came in. He looked at the table, the wall, anywhere but faces. The hearing officer read from the incident report. She read from Tasha Wilkins's statement. She read from Mrs. Evelyn Thompson's statement, pages long, precise, the work of someone who had spent decades teaching children to speak clearly. She read a summary of the doorbell footage. She read the record of prior complaints and use of force incidents. Then she looked up and asked if Harlan had anything to say. His union rep said that Officer Harlan stood by his account and believed he had acted within procedure. Camille Rivera let a second pass, then said in a mild, reasonable voice, like someone pointing out simple arithmetic, "Established procedure includes identifying a lawful reason for initiating contact." Officer Harlan stated there had been complaints of loitering. The district has no record of any such complaint for that location in recent months. We'd like to know where that information came from." The union rep started to respond. The hearing officer held up her hand. The silence that followed said everything that needed to be said. Harlan was suspended without pay pending the investigation's completion. Shortly after the hearing, the civil complaint was filed soon after. Camille called me with the news one evening. I was sitting on the kitchen floor of my apartment with a bowl of cereal gone soggy on the table. When I hung up, I stayed on the floor for a while, not because I was devastated, but because I'd been running on adrenaline and the landing felt sudden. My mother called later. "Trevor told me," she said. "Yeah," a pause, then quieter. "You did good." "Nya, I just sat in the room," I said. "No," she said firmly. "Don't do that. You sat at a bus stop and kept your head. You called me. You talked to the lawyer. You sat in that room. That counts. All of it counts." Another pause. "The rest is just consequence. You set it in motion. I thought about that." "Mom, how long have you been doing this?" Quietly turning things into consequences. She was quiet for so long I thought she might not answer. Then she said, "Since before you were born." I didn't have words for that. I thought about the early mornings, the careful words, the flat voice that could silence rooms. I thought about the armor and the teaching of armor and the reasons it has to exist. I thought about all the things she had navigated with that icy precision for years and never explained, because explaining would have meant I had to understand too soon. "I'm sorry I never asked more questions," I said. "You weren't ready," she said. "Now you are." A breath. "Get some sleep." Some time has passed since then. Derek Harlan resigned from the Metropolitan Police Department before his pension would have fully vested. The civil case is still ongoing. Camille says these things take time, and she says it like someone who knows exactly how much time and is content to wait. Tasha Wilkins and I had coffee at Ember in the winter, at the same table where I'd sat with my cracked phone and bruised wrist. She was a medical student, it turned out. She had a laugh that filled the room, and she said she had almost not taken her phone out, afraid it would make things worse. I told her it might have been worse without it. We didn't solve that question. Some questions you just carried. Mrs. Evelyn Thompson brought jerk chicken to our house one evening. My mother accepted it with the warmth she reserved for people she truly admired. They sat at our kitchen table for a long time, and when I came down to refill my water, I found them talking not about the hearing or the videos, but about the neighborhood, what it had been and what it could still become. My mother was laughing at something Mrs. Thompson had said, really laughing, the kind that reached her eyes and made her look exactly like herself. It was a sound I kept. I transferred to Georgetown Law in the spring. Camille wrote one of my recommendation letters and never once suggested it was connected to anything. My mother pretended not to know about the letter until I told her, and even then she just said good in that way that meant she was proud, but had decided long ago that some things don't need to be spoken aloud. Now, as the seasons change and the maple in the backyard is full and green, the morning light comes in at a different angle. My mother is at the kitchen island when I come downstairs, reading her phone with her glasses low, a travel mug steaming beside her hand. She looks up. "Morning, baby, morning," I say, and go for the coffee. She watches me move around her kitchen, which is also my kitchen. The place where I learned that careful words are not weakness, that steady voices are not passivity, that the most dangerous person in any room is sometimes the one whose name you don't yet know. I pour my coffee. She goes back to her phone. Outside, the maple is lush and green. The light is good, and the day has not yet become anything at all. The strap of my backpack hangs on the hook by the door. The old one went in the trash. I didn't want it any more. My wrist has healed. It left no trace you can see. But I know it happened. Derek Harlan knows it happened. Tasha Wilkins's phone knows it happened. Thousands of people in the comments know it happened. Mrs. Evelyn Thompson knows it happened. And now my mother and I know it together in a way we didn't quite before. She pours the last of the coffee into my travel mug without me asking. She has been doing that since I was small, anticipating, preparing, quietly handling the things that are hers to handle. I used to think it was just how she loved. Now I know it is also who she is. They are the same thing, it turns out. They always have been. I pick up the mug. The coffee is exactly the right temperature. It doesn't taste bitter at all.